All right, tonight a fake recording of Kamala Harris, why that has Elon Musk and Gavin Newsom going at it. Plus, what the frack? Did we just witness the first flip-flop for the Democratic candidate? Also this evening, the warning about Iran, how intelligence officials suggest Tehran is out to get Donald Trump. Plus the new $35 trillion milestone. We're asking Kevin O'Leary how we can get out of this debt mess. It is 99 days until the November 5th presidential election. Do you know who you're voting for? This is The Hill on NewsNation. All right, hello there. Good evening. I'm Blake Berman. Welcome to Washington, and welcome to Camelot? That is seemingly the suggestion from New York Magazine. Would you look at this right here? The front cover of its latest issue depicting a triumphant vice president riding high above her Democratic peers, a reference to the Kennedy years. But it is now a week into the new race, and there are questions about what could come next for the presumptive Democratic nominee for president. For example, one lawmaker privately telling our partners at thehill.com, quote, "We need to be very clear-eyed, and it's going to be brutally tough." And you can take it from the vice president herself. In her first fundraiser over the weekend, she warned, quote, "We have a fight ahead of us, and we are the underdogs of this race." Now, the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, the Keystone State, could be the key. Tonight, Michigan's Governor Gretchen Whitmer is stumping alongside her counterpart from Pennsylvania, Josh Shapiro. He is viewed as potentially one of the frontrunners for Harris's running mate position. But tonight, there's also a reversal from the vice president. In 2019, then a candidate in the Democratic presidential primary, the California senator vouched for a ban on fracking.
There's no question I'm in favor of banning fracking. So, yeah. And this is something I've taken on in California. I have a history of working on this issue.
All right, now fracking allows for the underground development of natural gas and oil. It is a big deal in many parts of Pennsylvania. And as thehill.com now notes, and NewsNation has confirmed, the Harris campaign is now saying Vice President Harris no longer, as you heard there in 2019, supports a ban, a full reversal. We begin tonight with Connor Lamb. He is the former Democratic congressman from Pennsylvania. Congressman, thanks for being with us here on the Hill. First time, I believe, on the show. We appreciate it. All right, so Kamala, are you there, Congressman? Is that where you are? Or are we about to see more policy positions, more changes at the top of the ticket?
Well, I think it's to her great credit that she made this announcement on fracking. The reality is that the world has changed a lot in the last 5 years since the earlier statement that you quoted. The Ukraine war in particular has really highlighted the need of the entire world to access natural gas from the U.S. The other thing is just prices. You know, what inflation has done to people's pocketbooks in Pennsylvania and all over the country, it kind of shines a light on the fact that we need to use all of our energy resources to keep people's electric bills low, to allow them to cool their houses in the summer, heat them in the winter. And so she's doing the right thing. She's learned in time. And I think that's the sign of a good leader, in my opinion.
I hear you, and I saw your post where you say it is a sign of a good leader. But, I mean, you know how America works, Congressman. They look at this stuff and they say, wait a minute, she said that, now she's saying this. Isn't that just sort of the politics of usual that we hate on both sides?
No, because everybody out here in the normal world, you know, blue-collar voters in Pennsylvania has changed their mind about something in their life, probably oftentimes about many important things. In this instance, Vice President Harris came out on her own and got ahead of it and explained what her position actually was. It wasn't like she was caught in a flip-flop or something like that on a debate stage. She's intentionally thinking about what her policies are now that she's the presumptive nominee for an entire country. Okay. And, you know, some of these people you can't please. If she didn't do this, she'd show up in Pennsylvania and they'd say, oh, look how out of touch she is. She hasn't changed her policy on fracking. So she's doing the right thing.
Yeah, John Fetterman did this in the primary race that you ran, right? He changed his position, so you know this well. Speaking of knowing well, you know Pennsylvania well. President Trump was up 3.5, give or take, on Joe Biden before the president stepped out. Polling now shows that he is up 2 on the vice president, Kamala Harris. Why is he winning Pennsylvania?
Well, he's been coming here for quite a long time, since he was a candidate the first time. Also, the mood of the electorate, we all can sense it. People are dissatisfied. They remember the pre-COVID, pre-inflation days. And I think at this point are giving Trump too much credit for those days. But the reason you've seen Vice President Harris pick up numbers in the polls is a lot of people in Pennsylvania that voted for Trump don't like him, and they don't really want in their heart of hearts to vote for him again. And I really believe there's a window of time here where their mind is open, and you're seeing already in these poll numbers the idea that maybe I could vote for her, and they're going to listen to what she says on issues like natural gas and Social Security and other things that are important to Pennsylvanians. And if she seals the deal, she has a real opportunity in this state.
There is the possibility that your governor on your side of the aisle, Josh Shapiro, is tapped potentially as the vice presidential pick. Should she do it?
I think it'd be a great choice, but I would echo the same thing he has said, was it's a personal choice for her. And I don't think she wants to feel, backed into any one corner. I think she wants to get comfortable with who she's going to choose because how important that job is. But I would think of it like this, when you get a cell phone call from an unknown number, a lot of times you don't answer it. If you get one from a number that's in your phone, you're going to answer it to find out what's going on. And Josh Shapiro is extremely well known in this state. It's like he's in people's phones. And when they hear him saying, our administration will never come after your job on the pipeline, they're going to believe it a little bit more. And I think it could be an advantage.
Josh Shapiro, I should note, the governor there against a ban on fracking, now the new position of Kamala Harris, where we just started. Connor Lamb, former Democratic congressman from the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. Thank you, sir.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
You got it. All right. Joining me today throughout the hour here on The Hill, Chris Stirewalt, NewsNation political editor, host of The Hill Sunday. Julia Manchester, national political reporter for The Hill. Scott Bolden, NewsNation political contributor, former D.C. Democratic Party chair. And Mick Mulvaney, former Trump White House chief of staff, NewsNation contributor. Hello to you all. Nice to have you all in on this Monday. Haven't seen you in person in a while. Good to have you here, Mick. What about this? Where is the Democratic Party right now? Because you got New York Magazine floating Camelot out there, Chris. And I wonder if we've now a week later gotten to the point of, wait a minute, she's for this and not for that? Like, where are we in the state of the race?
Well, today at the American Enterprise Institute, we had our first election watch session, which is the longest running panel of election analysis in the United States. And everybody had a question, which was, when does Harris start her pivot?
Yeah.
When does she start her pivot, and how much latitude will her party give her to pivot? Walk out? Lo and behold, there it is. And fracking is a perfect issue, a great issue for her to start the reset, to say to the general electorate. Now, that's contingent on one important question. Will her party let her do it?
Yeah.
Republicans will let Donald Trump say anything. He can say he's this way on abortion, he's that way on abortion, he'll do this, he'll do that. He has incredible latitude to change his positions publicly on a host of issues. Maybe not immigration, maybe not this, that, or the other thing, but he can be anywhere he wants to be, and Republicans will stick with him. Now we'll find out whether Democrats will afford Harris the same.
So you mentioned abortion with Trump. He's changed his position on TikTok, right? So like all sorts of things. Chris and I just wrote down the word, Mick, reset. Is that what we're going to see?
Yeah, I guess, and that's typical, right? I mean, typically, again, you can't use that word about this election cycle hardly at all, but typically someone would have gone through a primary and had to run a little bit to the left if you're a Democrat, right, if you're a Republican, then you sort of pivot to the center, right? It's what you do. I think Chris raises the right question, but I ask it a different way. Not whether or not they'll let her get away with it, but how many times will they? I think this is okay. I think it's fine, especially going to Pennsylvania and say, look, when I ran before, I see this. Now I've been in office for a couple of years. I changed my mind. That's a completely reasonable explanation. You were nodding
along with Connor Lamb there.
I don't think this is an issue one way or the other. The question is, how many times could she do it? Because you can't do it 5, 6, 7, 8 times, because then you look like a flip-flopper on everything. So I think she has to be careful.
It's interesting. You're also seeing her VP picks or her potential VP picks going through this. So in Pennsylvania, let's take Josh Shapiro, for example. Last year, Josh Shapiro sided with Republicans in the House of Representatives in Pennsylvania in pushing for school vouchers.
Yeah, he's for vouchers.
He got a lot of a lot of pushback from the vouchers, and then ended up sort of backing off of that last year. Mark Kelly, senator from Arizona, another one, used to be very, out against the PRO Act, which would essentially pave the way towards making the unionizing effort easier for groups. He now is in favor of the PRO Act. So you're seeing all of these contenders contenders sort of try to audition as best as they can. Tim Walz, he's someone who has sort of come up in the spotlight over the past few days. He's getting a lot of pushback for being too liberal on the ticket. So right now, the Democrats, the ticket, they have to figure out where they want to be because Republicans are already starting to define them.
Drill, baby, drill. Is that where you are?
My firm is based in Pennsylvania.
There you go.
You know, why isn't it just growth? I mean, she's been a vice president for 4 years. You're running for a primary, and then you're running a general. She didn't have that, but you see these changes in the Republican and Democratic side when they're in primaries and then when they're running nationally. I think the Democratic Party is going to let her do whatever she wants to do and get out ahead of not a flip-flop, if you will, but what her affirmative positions are. Because remember, for 4 years, she's been supporting the Biden agenda.
I mean, it can
Is
be
there
a
a limit, though, on how many times she can do that, Scott?
I think as long as she's got different groups doing phone calls or group calls, raising millions of dollars and hiring 200,000 volunteers, I think she's got a lot of leeway because now there's this new energy. The real issue for Kamala Harris is in the Democratic Party, and remember, this is before the debate and before the DNC convention in a few weeks, can she sustain this energy level, this positive energy
Kamala,
that people have?
that's why I started with that image. Like, I mean, you could do that for so long until you're like, I'm for fracking. I'm against fracking, but I'm for fracking.
As my uncle used to say, she needs to ride this sucker till the wheels fall off.
Speaking of riding, why is she riding a coconut?
Okay, so
Coconut tree.
you have time to explain that?
That's like a meme thing that her campaign's using. I want to ask you. It's a thing on the left right now, and for her supporters.
She said.
I want to ask you something she said way back when. J.D. Vance. There's a question about if he's digging a hole too big for him right now. Here was J.D. Vance last night as it relates to families and to people who don't have children. He was asked about it. People running the country, et cetera, so on and so forth. I want to get your reaction on the other side.
The left has increasingly become explicitly anti-child and anti-family. They've encouraged young families not to have children at all because of concerns over climate change.
Okay. Where is he right now, Mick?
He's fine. Look, if you're not working for Donald Trump, if Chris Stirewalt doesn't yet work for Donald Trump and I'm Donald Trump, say, Blake, what do you think about Chris? I think, what do you think about Chris? That means he's thinking of hiring him. If Chris already works for Donald Trump and Donald Trump calls you and says, Blake, what do you think about Chris? That means he's thinking of firing him. Okay? That's just how the system works. And he's not asking those questions right now. Okay. My guess is that, look, you all go through this. Whenever you move from a congressional race, a governor's race, a Senate race, to a national race, you're going to go through these types of growing pains.
Yeah, but I'm sorry, go right ahead.
Well, just don't pick niche candidates for your running mate. J.D. Vance scratched a very narrow, very intense, specific itch among national, they call themselves NatCons, national conservatives. A lot of them are traditional Catholics. A lot of them want to see a return to a moral rectitude and traditional family roles. And they feel that energy intently, and they're there for it. But that's not the itch that you scratch with your running mate pick. You scratch the big itch. You go for where persuadables that you can bring to the ticket, not just turn up the volume with the bass.
All right, still to come here on the Hill over the next 47 minutes. Elon and Newsom going at it over Kamala Harris. What Musk did that has the California governor responding with legislation. And later, Stirewalt breaks down one big divide in this election. You're watching The Hill here on NewsNation. Stay with us. All right, welcome back here to The Hill on NewsNation. So a new report tonight from the Wall Street Journal on how foreign countries are trying to interfere with our elections. U.S. intelligence officials saying that Iran is out to get Donald Trump and Russia is trying to help him. Iran reportedly trying to harm Trump's chances by using propaganda and fake online personas to create distrust in U.S. political institutions. According to the Office of the Director of National Intelligence, Russia continues to favor Trump and hurt Democrats due to Republicans' opposition to the war in Ukraine. Now, the report also notes that China is not involved in the efforts to influence U.S. elections. And then there's the threat of artificial intelligence. Elon Musk and the governor in California, Gavin Newsom, are in a social media spat over a fake recording of Vice President Harris. Now, a parody version of Harris's campaign ad is going viral after Musk shared it on his platform without disclosing changes to the vice president's voice. Here is just some of that clip.
I, Kamala Harris, am your Democrat candidate for president because Joe Biden finally exposed his senility of the debate. Thanks, Joe. I was selected because I am the ultimate diversity hire. I'm both a woman and a person of color. So if you criticize anything I say, you're both sexist and racist.
Okay, that is not real. Now, Governor Newsom is calling out the Post saying, quote, manipulating a voice in an ad should be illegal. And he says he is going to be putting forth legislation in the upcoming days to deal with this. All right, Scott, counselor, where are we with this right now, and how do you deal with this right now? Because I could see the argument of freedom of speech maybe, but there's clear manipulation here going on. Like how do we deal with this?
It's disinformation, right? It's stealing someone's AI voice without disclosing it or without their permission or authority. That's the law in Tennessee. California is going to be next. But it's early on in how we are going to enforce and bring into compliance how we manage AI. And each attorney general is going to struggle with that. But right now, Tennessee and California are leading on it. Now, I know it's a parity. If it was an elected official doing this or a campaign, they'd file a complaint with the FEC. They're public figures. I don't think whether you sue them or try to get an AG to prosecute him for this. Well, and what makes it more difficult is Elon is the publisher and the owner of X. So who's going to enforce this bad conduct or irresponsible conduct?
Well, what happens when some 12-year-old kid on a couch puts this out, right? You're not going to the FEC. You can't tell the cable channels if it airs like a traditional ad, or the newspapers take that down.
But it ought to be illegal because you're stealing someone's AI voice.
They say no. They say...
well, of course they're going to say no. Let me...
Well, no, hold on. Why do you disagree?
Because I think the law is on my side on this one. At the risk of doing something I shouldn't do, which is challenge you on the law. What was the Hustler case about? The Falwell case, 1988, that said parody, even if it's really nasty, is absolutely legal under the First Amendment. That was an ad. And it was using the voice of Jerry Falwell. It was printed, but it was as if Jerry was saying it himself. And the Supreme Court said, this is really awful, but this is what the First Amendment
protects. But those are mutually exclusive issues. I agree that case stands for parody. What I disagree with you is you can't steal someone's AI voice and then promote it, publish it, and think that's okay.
I think
it's illegal. It's going to be illegal in 2 states.
I think
watch more states to follow.
I think you can if it's obvious that it's parody. That's what the Supreme Court says. If you're trying to pass it off as real, I think you're right. But if it's so over the top as to be outrageous,
wasn't disclosed here. Hold on. That wasn't disclosed. That looked like it was real to me.
And I think that would be the case. The challenge would be on the facts, not on the law.
In Tennessee and in the future in California.
Yeah, it's an interesting point that you bring up, Mick, because I remember last year when I was covering the Republican primary, there was a bit of a back and forth between the Trump campaigns and the DeSantis campaigns. Essentially, the Trump campaign was putting out all of these photoshopped images of, Ron DeSantis, for example, riding on a rhinoceros or doing like very bizarre things. But then the DeSantis campaign put out a digital video that included AI photos that were very convincing, mixed in with real photos, one in which Donald Trump was seemingly hugging Anthony Fauci. So this is something going back to that primary. Then earlier this year, we had the Dean Phillips robocall, or the Joe Biden robocall in New Hampshire.
Yeah.
So this is something that I think
people not to show up, essentially.
Exactly. So this is the first campaign cycle where we're really grappling with this. And, I think we're going to start to see politicians like Gavin Newsom try to set a precedent.
I want to get to you for a second, but here's that robocall that I'm referring to. So this is that we're referring to. So this happened earlier in the cycle in New Hampshire. Listen, again, a fake.
Voting this Tuesday only enables the Republicans in their quest to elect Donald Trump again. Your vote makes a difference in November, not this Tuesday.
All right, so how do we deal with this, and how are we going to deal with this, which I guess are kind of two different questions.
Of all of the kinds of speech that we have to protect, that the First Amendment contemplates, political speech is number one. That's the one. Unpopular political speech, gross political speech, all of that political speech. Now, the courts are going to have to sort out a bunch of questions that relate to artificial intelligence because the technology improves and all of these things. And I believe, and I'm not sure, but I believe that what the Tennessee law is aimed at doing is saying you can't do it to another civilian. You can't do me to you, right? Two normal people can't do it. But if it's commentary on an elected official, if it's commentary on somebody who's seeking power, we have to be very, very, very careful about preserving even distasteful commentary, because that's the kind of commentary that's the most important to protect, because that's where you have to draw the line.
Got it. Don't disagree. But this is disinformation, and there's another bucket where you're stealing someone's AI voice. Both of you all are correct, but I'm just creating, AI creates another different bucket, and the laws are going to say you can't steal that voice.
But
now, they have to sort through
who decides
that.
what's disinformation and what's parody? The subjectiveness of those tests is what's hard, is that we don't want judges to have to be able to say, well, this is disinformation, this is parody, because a lot of those are subjective.
Courts are going to have to sort through that, or an AG, or personal lawsuit against someone else.
By the way, one of the reasons this is that I'm bullish news long term.
Yes.
You can come to outlets like this and we tell you what's real.
Is Blake actually AI? We don't know. We don't know. I can't tell you.
With those teeth, it's hard to say.
It's that good.
All right, I'm going to end it here. So much more ahead on the Hill, including Kevin O'Leary on a 4-letter word. It's a bad one. Debt. Trump agreeing to sit down with the FBI over his attempted assassination. So where does the investigation stand? The new details and the gender divide. How this year's election is pitting young women against young men. Steyerwalt breaks down the numbers. You're watching The Hill here on NewsNation. All right, welcome back here to The Hill on NewsNation. So new information tonight on the ongoing investigation of the failed assassination attempt of former President Donald Trump. It's been 2 weeks since the shooting, and many questions remain unanswered, including the motive of the 20-year-old would-be assassin. NewsNation is learning tonight that a local police sniper spotted the shooter 90 minutes before shots rang out. Also today, members of the bipartisan task force investigating the shooting were chosen. It will include 7 Republicans and 6 Democrats. Trump will also participate in a routine victim interview with the FBI. And we now know the shooter searched about power plants and mass shootings online as well. All this comes after the former president vowed to continue holding outdoor rallies, saying, quote, "No one can ever be allowed to stop or impede free speech or gathering." Meantime, in this election year, we are seeing a new trend. Younger voters are splitting who they support. So why are we seeing this? Steyerwalt is here to break it all down. Chris.
Did you see that they're having white dudes for Harris? Did you see this?
I saw stuff like, yeah.
There's white dudes for Harris and white dudes for Harris. And why would you do something as cringy as having a white dudes for Harris conference call? I'll tell you why. Is because we know this is true, that Democrats do better with women and Republicans do better with men. But how much better are Democrats doing with women and how much better are Republicans doing with men? These are material considerations. So you should materially consider this headline from the Wall Street Journal. America's new political war. I don't like it when they use words like that, but new political war pits young men against young women. And what the Journal did is they took their polls from February and they took it from July, and they saw how Republican and Democratic voters 18 to 29. Now, I'm here to tell you all the time that they don't vote, so they don't matter that much, but they matter some. Right? Younger voters are 12 or 15% of the electorate. It's not for nothing in a very close race. So here was the difference in young voters from February to July. Men went from, you see it right there, that's a 14-point increase among men for Donald Trump since February. And among women, they got more Biden-y, right? They got so look at the division there. You've got men 50% for Donald Trump, these are young men, to 36% for Biden, 58 to 28. Those are big numbers. But maybe it's always been that way. How was it in 2016, the battle of the sexes? How did it go then? Oh, look at that. That's a difference, but it's not as big of a difference as we saw in this Wall Street Journal poll. Maybe it was just because there was a man and a woman. Maybe it was the first co-ed general election. But what about 2008? How about then? What do you see here? Okay. Now we're getting to something. You see here that in 2008, dudes and dudettes voted about the same, right? Women were more intensely Democratic than men, but both were very intensely Democratic. What we're seeing here, and I think this helps us understand the J.D. Vance pick and what's going on. And J.D. Vance and a lot of people are mad that young women aren't getting married and having kids and having more kids and all of that stuff. And this is, white dudes for Harris, it's all of a piece, which is as the Democrats become a more female-forward party, right? The Republicans, you see the counter reaction on the other side. You saw it at the Republican convention with wrestlers ripping off their shirts and all of this machismo malarkey going on. The intense genderification of these two things is important. But I will just say this for Republicans as they think about this, which is women vote a lot more than men. There were 10 million more female voters in 2020 than there were male voters. Women make up a majority of the population, and they make up by 3 or 4 points majority of the electorate. If you had to pick boys or girls, you'd probably pick girls.
Steyerwalt breaks it down.
All right, so here's my question. If women are so much more inclined to vote Democratic,
yeah,
and they're a bigger piece of the electorate, why is the race as close as it is?
It's not a gender gap, it's a marriage gap. So what we see every 4 years is the same, really every 2 years is the same thing. Single people vote Democratic, married people vote Republican. That's Joe Biden lost among married women by a few points, but won unmarried women by 20 points. So as people get older, and this is really what's at risk for Republicans in a couple of ways right now. The conveyor belt that carried voters, both male and female, into the Republican Party was what? Getting married and having kids, settling down. The trip to the suburbs was a trip across party lines very often, that as people got older and their interests changed, their voting changed. Makes sense. If the age of first marriage, J.D. Vance is right as a Republican to be mad about what's going on. The more single women there are and the more women without children that there are, the harder it is for Republicans to turn that corner.
So didn't you just say correctly and properly in an appropriate fashion the same thing that J.D. Vance has said very poorly?
I would never nominate me to be running mate. I would never tell anybody to pick me to do anything.
The Democrat Party is made up of childless women. That's their base. That's their base.
The Democratic Party's base at its core, and this is a problem that Democrats hope that they will have remedied with Kamala Harris. What's the core of the Democratic Party? It is black women, particularly, and married and unmarried, right?
50 and older.
Yeah, 50 and older. That's the bedrock of the Democratic Party, is black women, and it makes a huge difference. Democrats do well with women as a group by a large number. They do better with single women, with young women. And I would just say this about what J.D. Vance said. There's a lot of ways that you can say true things without offending people. And when you call them childless cat ladies, they may get the idea that you don't want their support. They may get the hint that you're not interested in them supporting you.
Or you're reminding them of a very painful part of their life.
Yes.
And making them feel a certain way.
Yeah, one question I have, Chris, quickly, is I was talking to a Democratic source sort of involved with this White Dudes for Harris effort. And they say just peeling off a little bit of that white male support from Donald Trump could go a long way. Would you agree with that assessment?
I think that you don't say white people this, and I don't even like when we say black people this. I think that this kind of egregious, too on the nose, making everything about race is gross. And when you make it about, and I forget, there's language in their statement that says something about it's like the patriarchy or whatever, and it's dumb. It's just dumb, and don't do that. Do things with your policies and do things with your rhetoric. Do things with your running mate. Do things whatever. What did Barack Obama do in 2008? He picked a guy that said to voters, I'm cool with white dudes. He didn't have a conference call that said white dudes for Obama. He picked a white dude for Obama.
Yeah, but Kamala's not doing that. This is an organic organizations and a parody on black women for the Dems who have been meeting for years by conference call on Sunday night. So it's not the campaigns that are driving it. It's organic, and that's really interesting to me, notwithstanding your concerns about the race question. Because you had black women, black men, white women. It's organic. It's not driven by the Democrats.
We'll leave it there, as Chris smirks off.
I don't know. We'll talk in the break.
We'll consider it. All right, meantime, President Biden is proposing major reforms for the Supreme Court. Here he is just a little while ago at the Lyndon B. Johnson Presidential Library in Austin, Texas.
The court's being used to weaponize an extreme and unchecked agenda. The court is mired in a crisis of ethics. These scandals involving the justices have caused public opinion to question the court's fairness and independence that are essential.
Now, the changes would include, for example, 18-year term limits for justices, a binding code of ethics, and a constitutional amendment that would limit presidential immunity. You know what it doesn't have in there?
Age?
An age limit. There you go. So it has a year limit, 18 years. But it doesn't from President Biden have an age limit. I'm just noting. I'm saying he throws a lot out there. And to be clear, and you can back me up on this, this is going nowhere.
Nowhere
fast.
No, nowhere fast. I mean, I think a lot of this has to do with Biden's legacy and really trying to punch back at conservatives who have successfully campaigned for years on appointing conservative justices and judges to courts up and down the country. But at the same time, I mean, it would take, for term limits, I mean, that would take a lot to go through. All
right. Still to come here on the Hill. He's a businessman, investor, and he is a shark. On the other side of the break, I'll talk live with Kevin O'Leary on the $35 trillion problem. That's the music that means we're going to break. And on the other side, Mr. Wonderful himself. By the way, what's going on with McDonald's? What's McDonald's telling us? We're back in a few here on the Hill. $35 trillion for the first time, a staggering number. And if you just spread that out across the United States of America, it essentially equates to $104,000 in debt for you, the person to your right, the person to your left. As you can see in this chart, the debt has ballooned under both Democratic and Republican presidents. So Republicans like to say, we're going to be the party of, we're going to stop spending. It's ballooned under Republicans. Democrats say, you know what, we've curbed deficits. It's ballooned under Democrats. That's where we are right now at $35 trillion. Scott asked Mick, former budget director, a fantastic question in the break.
You stealing my question? Or are you going to let me ask?
No, that's pretty good. I want to reenact.
As a U.S. citizen, how does $35 trillion in debt affect me on a day-to-day basis?
And why should I care? Why should you care?
Yeah, would you care? And this is how I answer that question. Would you care about it if you had to borrow money on your credit card to pay down your credit card? To pay off
way
the
to
interest?
do that.
Okay.
That's not good. I'd wind up in bankruptcy.
That's exactly right. That's the closest analogy I can get.
But how do
exactly
I feel?
The same.
How do I feel that on a day-to-day basis? Listening audience.
Live debt clock, by the way.
How about inflation?
Okay.
How about the way that we got to a balanced budget in the United States? We had a couple good breaks go our way. We won the Cold War. We had a big peace dividend. But there was another thing, which was the pain of inflation in the United States in the 1970s and at the beginning of the 1980s was so intense that people really thought about fiscal policy in a way. When the government, the only check that we have on government spending, because what do people want? They want low taxes and high spending. That's what they want. That's what people want all the time. They want low taxes.
And that's the deal Republicans and Democrats have cut.
That's right.
They have cut that deal. And so what do you get when you have low taxes and high spending? You have inflation because there's too much money that gushes out. Yeah. So inflation is the way that the government spending is kept in check is the debt. People hit a limit on debt and they say no more than that. If there is no such thing as that, then you just get, look, Mick Mulvaney is smarter and better on this than almost anybody in Washington, than almost anybody I know. It's in his bones.
Yep.
What's the truth? When you're running a 4% annualized GDP rate of growth, the economy was going gangbusters in the Trump administration. Hot growth. We still ran $1 trillion deficit. If you're stimulating an economy that's growing at 4%, this is like, this is doubling. This is like that sandwich they had at Kentucky Fried Chicken, where it's 2 chicken patties with a chicken patty in the middle, and it's all fried chicken. That's what's happening. If you're borrowing $1 trillion,
where are you eating?
You can tell. You can tell the difference between us here, Mulvaney.
He loves McDonald's, and I'll get to that. I'll get to that in a second, by the way. But the other part, why do you care? because when you have to pay off that debt, now all of a sudden, the pie that you have to spend on things that we want, you're spending to pay off that debt.
Chris is right. That's never going to happen. Okay, we're never going to pay off the debt. No one actually pretends we're actually going to pay off the debt anymore. The only way this ends is that you end up printing more money to pay your interest carry, and that is inflationary. Okay,
which is a trillion.
And I don't know how it ends, but I know that's the road you go down. Washington is not capable of spending less money next year. That graph is interesting. There's no question. I was squinting at it.
Put it back up if we can.
But I think they're doing it by presidents, and I'm not sure that's the right way to look at it because presidents don't spend money. You need to look at it by who controls Congress at any given time. By the way, the end result will be similar because when Republicans controlled the House and the Senate in 17 and 18, they ran up the debt just the same as Obama did in the previous year. So I'm not defending my party. Right. Believe me, it takes both parties to get $35 trillion in debt, but I don't think it's fair to look at the president as much as the
But under Clinton, on the graph, it didn't. It
leveled off.
It leveled off.
That's parabolic, by the way, and it's only going to continue there. Julia, to put this in context, if you have a stack of $1 bills, we could go to the moon 10 times with stacking up $1 bills from here to the moon with where we are right now.
Yeah, I'm a visual learner, and unlike Nick, I am not well versed in this area. So, I mean, we need more people to put that visual out there. Look, but it's interesting from a campaign perspective. You hear Democrats talk about the infrastructure bill, and they really push that as the way everyone got out of the U.S. was able to get out of COVID and such. But Republicans hit back against that, saying that the infrastructure bill was tied to inflation. So I don't know. We'll see which voters.
I should note that Kevin O'Leary is miking up right now, and once we get him, we'll pop him up here to get his thoughts. But Mick, I wonder what you make of this. This was a headline from today. McDonald's misses estimates across the board as consumers pull back on dining out. In the U.S., same-store sales decreased by 0.7%. It's the first time of a decline in U.S. same-store sales in 16 quarters. When McDonald's is telling you that, you say what?
Well, we've talked about this a couple times. We saw it before on Walmart. They were doing well, but why were they doing well? They're doing well because the high market folks were moving down to Walmart. This is a sign of weakness in the economy. There's no question. People go to McDonald's. Go to McDonald's. If you haven't been in a long time, go. It's where America eats. It's where the guys who work in your front yard go have lunch every single day.
It's where I have lunch. And what are you talking about?
I know. When folks can't do that anymore, then there's a real softness in the economy. You're shaking your head now.
Okay, but here's an alternative theory. How come it's not that most of Americans are working from home now, not going in the office, not going in the workplace?
Okay. You would have seen that.
That's foot traffic.
Because you would have seen that in previous quarters.
All right, Kevin O'Leary, O'Leary Investments, Shark Tank fame, friend of the show. I believe we got you mic'd up now. Kevin, thanks for being back with us here on the Hill. Appreciate your time, sir, as always. I only have a couple here with you. So I'm wondering what you make of this $35 trillion number. Put it in context for me. How big of a problem is it?
Big. And I think it's time to start addressing it. I mean, everybody has an idea. Here's mine. And I hope we can pull this off. We have to open up the ANWR. The annual federal royalty on any wellhead is 16.23%. If we open up the ANWR, sell the oil to the Asians, we can reduce that debt by 20% in 5 years by just making sure the law says that all 16.23% of the royalty goes to reducing debt. That's just the ANWR. That's oil. But I think you can sell that because people will understand if we don't do this, we're screwed. And frankly, even if you hate hydrocarbons, you hate oil, you hate debt more. So this deal would be a piece of legislation that says there's no pork. The 16.23 off ANWR goes to national debt. By the way, the Norwegians did it in 1976, and within 11 years, they had $1 trillion fund. They're now the largest sovereign wealth fund in the world. We can do it too.
If that doesn't happen, though, like I hear your idea and I understand your idea, but that's your idea. And if Washington doesn't take you up on it, which is, let's be honest, probably unlikely, right? You know how things work in this town. What do we do? What happens next?
You know what I say to that? Give me a better idea. What do you got? Because right now, with an economy that's probably getting a little softer, you guys have just been detailing the consumer may be getting softer. The McDonald's data, people are worried about that. But this deficit is so huge that now we're at a place where we've got to have new ideas. If you've got a better idea, bring it. But I'm telling you, it's got to be addressed with legislation. Other countries have done this where they say, okay, enough. It's so big that we've got to pass a law that makes sure the money doesn't go somewhere else. The biggest problem we have in Washington is pork. It's back in a very big way. And 2 or 3 trillion of this debt has just been spent in the last 36 months with chips and science, IRA, infrastructure, yada, 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 woof, woof, woof. It doesn't matter what party's in place. This is just too crazy. And I think lawmakers are starting to get a little uncomfortable about it.
Kevin O'Leary, I wish we had more time. We know we'll have you on back soon. We got to run to a break here, but appreciate you jumping in front of a camera for us. Kevin, thank you, sir.
Take care. Bye-bye.
You got it. Leland Vitter, host of On Balance, other side of the break. You're watching The Hill. Stay with us. All right, so before we say goodbye, here's a story that caught our eye. Meta is being accused of censorship after removing the iconic photo of the Trump assassination attempt. The image was initially flagged as misinformation. The user threatened with being taken off the platform. A spokesperson for the social network says it was an error, and the problem has been fixed. Leland Vitter, host of On Balance. I guess this is part of the reason why they got out of news, huh?
Yeah, well, and now there's the accusations about Google in terms of how they're ranking news stories about Donald Trump or Kamala Harris. If you put into Google President Donald, it comes up as his first suggestion, President Donald Reagan. There's all these different issues. Look, we have to, for a long time, the press was the fourth estate and was a huge determinant in the American electorate, in the electoral process. And now big tech, whatever you want to call them in social media, is having an equally large role. And I think you're seeing a fascinating part of that storyline play out with Elon Musk.
Who you got coming up on the show tonight?
We got Bill O'Reilly coming up. Mark Halperin's coming up with some new reporting. And then we're also taking a look at how we're seeing this huge divide between young men and young women. Back when you were in college, I was in college, everyone was a liberal. And now 90%. Young men are now